Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to GB Gaming. Today we're going to be taking a more in-depth look at Third Age Total War, the Divide and Conquer submod version 1.2, as you can see down here. Now that I've finally got it right, thank you to the Elite Dwarf. And speaking of the Elite Dwarf, joining me today to have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion about the game are, of course, Galu and the Elite Dwarf. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. Now, just to give you a little bit of understanding on this, Galu is the lead developer of the mod and is currently in charge of all things, to my understanding. And the Elite Dwarf, you're primarily a modeler and artist, if I'm correct?
Yeah, 3D modeler.
3D modeler. And we'll be looking at some of your creations as we go through the game. So I believe what we were going to initially do is we were going to start up a single-player campaign, weren't we?
Yep.
And as we can see, we've got hundreds of thousands of races here. So is this reflective of the original Third Age, or are there a lot more races that you have involved here?
No, we've got about twice as many.
About twice as many?
If off the top of my head. We use every single faction slot that the game has, but 2 of them are currently not available, or 3 of them aren't available, so that would suggest maybe 28 factions.
28 factions, that would be...
I haven't counted in a while.
I won't count here, but rest assured there are quite a lot of them. I have been through them in a previous video, so do please find that one, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't. Or Galu does have a channel, which I'll be linking in the description below, where he's done quite a few in-depth looks at most of the factions, and you're doing a few playthroughs as well at the moment, aren't you?
I am indeed. I originally did it to teach people how to install the mod, and then I thought I'll tell them a little bit about the mod with the faction overviews, and then enough people said that it might be interesting for me to play it, and then here we are.
Actually, I've been thoroughly enjoying your videos, and it's taught me quite a lot about how to play the factions that I've tried. Now, I think it was suggested that we pop onto the Kingdom of Dale here, which they hang around here.
Correct, certainly do.
And now, I've been told that I must have it on Kill Me difficulty. Is that correct?
Well, Kill Me difficulty isn't exactly what I would call it, but very hard is how we balance the game. So
okay, that's how we're going to go with it. Excellent.
That's why we always suggest it.
I will leave all the other little bits as they are. Bardian Marksman, fantastic. Right, and let's start up, because what we really want to see is the startup message.
Yes. As we're going to shamelessly use you to answer an FAQ session.
I like that. I like that. Now, one thing I am going to do is I'm actually going to exit from here. Otherwise, I'll probably get some kind of copyright strike going on.
Yeah. I can teach you how to make those videos never appear as well. Save you time every time you start the campaign.
That might be a little bit... I do like watching them, though, in my spare time. It's probably not conducive for YouTube, but it is nice to watch them in your spare time, because you kind of gain an understanding of what some of the units might do, which is quite good, because there are a lot of units. Right, here we go. So, a very warm welcome to Divide and Conquer version 1.2. We're going to go through this. This message has been prepared to brief you on the major changes from Third Age 3.2, which was released in 2012?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know when 3.2 was released, actually.
I think it was 2012. And the core mechanics of that mod and this submod. I would ask that you take a few moments to read through this, as it will answer 80% of the questions we get asked. They're not going to read it, you know.
No, I know.
As a warning.
We needn't go through each stage, but just drawing it to people's attention will at least hopefully cut down on the questions we do get.
Yes, we're definitely not going to read it, but as a viewer, you must absolutely read it. There we go. But yes, this will answer many of the questions that you do have about the mod and how things get used. Oh, I didn't know the Palentio no longer get used. There you go. It's answered one of my questions. Right, let's exit this and pop into the game. Oh, and we get a little pop-up to tell us about the Kingdom of Dale itself. And this is something that each faction has individually, isn't it?
Yeah, those were written by someone long before even I joined the mod, and I had to touch them up a little bit, as unfortunately English wasn't his first language.
I see.
But they were written by someone else, so I've kept them as a sort of homage to the older teams.
I think it's quite a nice thing to have, though. I think it gives you an idea about the backstory of that particular faction. I think it's always nice to feel immersed in a mod like that, or in any game like that. I do hate the name Esgaroth, though. Now then. Right, let's just put... There are more things.
Yes, that's one of the... Dale get a unique script, and we talk about it at the beginning.
Okay, so actually, let's break from the questions that we were going to ask and actually talk about this unique script. And why don't you tell me a little bit about it?
All right, okay. The Dale script is a very, very simple one. If you are playing as Dale and you ally with Thranduil's Halls and Erebor, then to try and reflect and essentially build on the popularity of the Hobbit, you can train a couple of Dwarven units and a couple of Elven units, but you have to be allied to those factions in order to train them.
I see. And that's would that be a recent addition that you've popped in, or is it something that's been around for a while?
It was certainly popped in for version 1, but it wasn't around with 0.52, which was our kind of real and official first launch.
Okay, lovely. Right, let's just close this scroll. And we have a military report, which we'll just ignore. Pop through to that. Okay, so now here we are, and these are some of the lovely three-dimensional models that we can see here of the town. Now, we own Dale, we own horribly named Esgaroth. I think there's one more that we have, Grasgard down here.
And there's one more.
Is it over here?
Farther east.
Further east? Oh, what are you doing down here? That's not ours, is it? No.
No, that one right there.
Capuis. Oh, Calpis?
And then you have a fort east of that as well.
Oh, and we've got some people in there as well. Oh, this is potential. Well, I can see why this is here. Now, I suspect, and please do confirm if I'm right, that we're encouraged to use these fine gentlemen in here, of which Bjorn is one of them.
Yes.
To take this particular rebel town.
Yes, you are indeed. What is that particular rebel town called? I can't quite see. Do you want to try and read that one?
Oh, you do this to me on purpose, don't you?
I do.
Burmalinge, possibly?
Yes.
Oh,
spot on.
Good lord. Now, I imagine that this is one of the mechanics that you make use of, in the respect that if I take this, I'm going to be all the closer to Hrun, who are in this general direction.
Yeah, it was. Well, you say that it's for the player, but really it's actually to try and encourage the AI to take Burmalinge as fast as possible, because otherwise Dale don't really fight anyone, and the dwarves beat them to Rune, and the elves beat them to Dol Guldur. So we needed to get them to attack someone, and by giving them that fort, it made kick them up the arse, if you will.
I see. Well, we're going to talk about kind of scripts and AI in a little bit, but in order to give us the fullest possible picture, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, as you're working on Divide and Conquer as a almost a mod to a mod, really, isn't it? It's a sub-mod to Third Age Total War. What were the key features that you sought as modders to kind of extrapolate and improve upon the original design? Well,
Divide and Conquer is old, so when I joined Divide and Conquer, it already had an idea, it already had a path that it was heading down, and we just kind of built on that. And the main theme of DAC has always been choice. So Third Age obviously gives you a set number of factions. It gives you the main factions, I would suggest. It gives you iconic units like Gondor Infantry and the elves from the War of the Last Alliance that you see at the beginning of the Fellowship movie. And Divide and Conquer just wanted to build on that. So when certain factions are named, we wanted to represent them. So obviously Umbar is a faction in DAC, Khand is a faction,
Indeed.
But also even more important ones like Dunland. If you play Third Age Total War, you'll notice that Dunland don't exist. They are just troops represented when you play Isengard. So it was just an attempt to broaden everything, and I assume that's why they've gone for Divide and Conquer, because essentially it kind of suggests that maybe there's more to fight, and that's the whole theory. So DAC is always just choice. There's more units, there are more factions, there are more regions, and that's the basic template that we use to build the mod off of.
I see. Okay. Now, what are the key things that that DAC itself chooses to do, or both Third Age and DAC work on? Is it primarily a campaign-focused mod, as we're seeing here, or is it something that you would more associate with multiplayer?
No, yeah, it's much more a campaign-focused mod. That isn't necessarily to say that you can't play multiplayer, and you certainly can, but because the game is so old, there are so many hoops to jump through. The biggest one, of course, is that obviously this is a mod, as you say, and it's treated more like a DLC. So the way that the folder structure works for the DLC, so America's Teutonic, Britannic, and whatever the other one is, Jerusalem Crusades, they're basically each considered them a mod of their own, and then this is just like a DLC. And if you want to play multiplayer with someone, they have to have it installed in exactly the same way you do.
Ah, yes, that old chestnut.
So you can play it multiplayer, and it certainly works. Many people I've spoken to through doing DAC have played multiplayer, but it's difficult. So it's never been at the forefront of our minds when we're doing the work.
I think what we'll do is we'll pop into a battle here. We've got some Barding Herd who they're pretty hardcore, aren't they? 24 defense, so they can really stand. Do they have anything special here? Skilled against mouse, which is not going to be useful in this siege situation, but they are effective against armor, which is nice. Also got some longbowmen and Bjarn. What kind of? He has some Royal Archers, which have pretty good archer inventory. I think 7's a fairly good missile attack score, isn't it?
Yes, it is very good.
They actually also stand in combat as well, which is very nice. Right, let's move these fine gentlemen over here.
We shall engage.
We indeed shall engage.
Prevail.
I think we're going to make do with. We'll take 2. Oh no, we'll just take 1.
Yes.
There we go. Now, with regards to the campaign scenario, it's clear that this is very focused towards a campaign scenario. Are there any key features that you sought to improve upon from the base game?
Well, no, difficult to say. The choice, again, as I say, so it's just to add more things. So not to do anything too complicated, but just to add more. So certain units weren't represented in the base game. I should say, when I say base game, I do mean Third Age, not Medieval 2. But yeah, just to improve upon certain units that weren't existent, that didn't exist. Different little features like that. That's really been the whole goal.
And then recently it was the inclusion of the newer settlement models and castle models and whatnot to help, update the old models and to add more immersion by making them a little bit more realistic.
I think adding that visual flair is quite important. Because I do realise that you as modders must have limitations with what you can do with an engine of this age. I think Medieval 2, prior to Kingdoms, was released in 2006.
Yeah.
So it's not a new game. So I understand that there must be certain pressures that are placed on you.
Yes.
That mean you really have to think about what you can add and what you perhaps shouldn't add. Must make the process quite challenging at times.
Yes, the most infamous is the hard-coded limits. There's so many people that want this and want that, and how about this and how about that. But from our standpoint, knowing how the structure works, there's a lot of things that we just can't do or add anymore because we're near the hard-coded limit, such as adding new cultures, expanding the unit roster because the current limit is 500, adding more factions because, as Galu said previously, the max is 31. So there are hard-coded limits that we literally cannot go over. So we just have to work within that realm and decide what should we prioritize and what can we do without.
I see. I imagine that that you're also slightly restricted in what you can do via scripts. I've never explored the actual the language, if you like, when it comes to scripting for Medieval 2 Total War. But are there certain limitations that are placed on you there?
I couldn't possibly say. Unfortunately, the biggest flaw in my my repertoire, if that's the right word, is that I've never been able to script. I understand the basics, and my knowledge of coding does help, and I use the word coding loosely because that's just what we call it, but it's not really. But I can copy and paste existing scripts and edit them to my liking, but I've never been able to edit them from the ground up, and I'm uncertain as to the parameters. But I do have it on good authority that my learned friend, the Elite Dwarf, does have some scripting knowledge, so he might be able to answer you a little better than me.
I'd love
yes, that, yeah. Yes, I do have some scripting knowledge from the overviews I've done of Medieval 2, and a large portion of it is based off of using the in-game triggers. So there are triggers of, let's say, for example, is this settlement being attacked? Did this unit walk into this specific region, and so essentially you have to use those triggers that are associated with the game's engine to make it do what you want. And there are extreme limits because, like I said, you have to use the already existing triggers. So you have to think a little bit out of the box and think about how can you reach your goal using this current set of building blocks that you can't alter yourself. Because obviously, if you had access to the source code, you can essentially do anything you want. But with scripting, you have to use what's there in front of you, and you have to think of many times creative ways of how to achieve your goal. And most of the times, it's a pretty lengthy process because you can't just go from point A to point B immediately. You have to work your way around, and you have to the way it works is you just have to go a longer route. And
the fantastic workarounds. So
exactly,
you may have to, in order to, for example, have a faction take a particular area with a pre-existing army, you might have to, when something reaches a particular position, spawn another army there and then hope that it does what you want.
Yes, yeah, there's the commands to create new units, so you would create a new army, you'd create a new general and whatnot, and then either spawn it next to the settlement, spawn it away, have it move towards the settlement, like people can see in the Corsair invasion script. The enemy army spawns near the shore, and then it'll walk up towards the settlement, and it's just a pretty lengthy process because you have to do all these checks and balances, and it's literally brought down to zeros and ones. You have to create counters and say, has the army been created? Yes. All right. Set this counter to 1. Then do this if this counter is 1, and that's basically how you have to base your scripts instead of the source code way, which would be much easier. But
it would.
For most parts, it is a doable process. But sometimes you're just limited to what you can do. You
are. I mean, that's one thing that's quite difficult for not all games, but for most games that people want to mod is, generally speaking, if you're modding 99% of games, you're not able to touch the source code, so you couldn't touch the executable of a game.
Correct.
And that it brings its own inherent limitations because you're effectively adding on to a pre-existing construct. So you often have to find little workarounds, kind of ways to trick the engine into doing what you want it to do. And I think that's, when it comes to scripting, I think that's probably 3/4 of trying to find a way around a limit that you're not allowed to breach. Makes it quite exciting, but also headbangingly frustrating if the AI won't do what you want it to.
Exactly.
Now, at present, with your factions, are there any factions that you've now looked at and gone, I'm done with this faction, I'm perfectly happy with the way that it works, with the way that it reacts, and with all the units that are in?
If I may answer first, I would suggest that, from my point of view, most factions I feel like that. I feel like you can do too much with a mod. You can go and just continuously do something new, and eventually all factions kind of converge to feel like exactly the same, but they all just look different. So you have to get to a point where you stop, as you say. And with most factions, I feel like they are where we want them to be. But one of our biggest flaws is that I personally, before I joined the mod, when I played the mod, I never played evil factions, and that's the same to this day. So most of the evil nations have had little to no work done to them. So we're going to have to do some work there. But otherwise, most factions, no, I think they're about where we want them, and they're doing what we'd like them to do.
Oh, that's very, very good to hear. One thing I did note, kind of as we were just talking then, there were a couple of little events that popped up, one of which was Ithilien being reclaimed, and the other was Moria or Khazad-dûm being reclaimed. Now, those are also scripts, just moving back to that. To my understanding, they're kind of turn 1 events.
Yeah, there's a turn 1, what we call the auto expansion, and this is so that, because you can do different things so that a human player will have this experience and the AI can have a different experience. And obviously the AI is infinitely stupider than a human, for want of a word that I don't actually think is a real word. But so we do certain things.
It's not the stupidest word, though.
Stupidest. But so, in order to make it hard for the human player, the game is set up with a certain file, and that sets the parameters at turn 0. But then, in order to make the AI slightly better, we give them a set number of regions at turn 1, and we call this the turn 1 auto expansion. And as you've just seen, there are a few regions dotted around the world where you'll get a message to say that they've fallen or they've been reclaimed. And unfortunately, 2 of those regions are reclaimed in the turn 1 auto expansion, so you get the message straight away.
It's a good thing to have, though. I think it adds to the immersion from my perspective, particularly with things like Ithilien, which is, I believe, mentioned in the films.
Yes, Frodo and Sam spend quite a lot of time in Ithilien.
Plus, it makes the factions seem, a little bit more realistic because they're actually doing something. They're acting rather than being acted upon by the player. So it makes the world more lively, I guess.
Mm.
Right then, I'm not sure what the range of these fine gentlemen is like, but we're just gonna go for it. Go on. Off you go. It looks like all my men are firing, which is probably not what I want them to do at this point, but...
What is the garrison in Bermalinge? Is it all rebels?
It's fairly
or is it
poor. It's the standard rebel units, and these... It seems I can't turn my camera. These standard rebel units, they're kind of Fort Axemen, Fort Spearmen, etc.
Yes.
So I shouldn't have too much of an issue with them. Except for the fact
I would submit that were you to send your barding herd in after you've loosed every arrow, you would see them just massacre everything on the other side of that wall.
That is my plan, if I could ever learn how to turn the camera effectively. Ah, there we are. Now we are going to lose a few men on our way there. I've got my barding herd in loose formation, which is always a very beneficial thing to do.
Yeah, it keeps the arrows spread out.
If you're being fired upon. Actually, I'm not sure how many archers they indeed have.
Probably a couple of units. It's a shame you're not attacking the castle of Miraron, which is even further northeast, because within that castle are 2 units of, I think they're called Dorwinian... No, I can't remember what I called them. Oh, that's so annoying. They're outrageously overpowered for the early game, and it takes quite an army to take them down. And they're a mercenary unit available in Ravanian, and I've forgotten their name. But
the privateers.
Privateers, that's it. Privateer Axemen and Privateer Cavalry. They're really overpowered for the early game, and you can find them in the castle of Miraron. And so you probably would have lost, I'm afraid, because they're just so OP.
That's good for me to know. I will not be going there in future.
Are basic. They can hold their own, but they are basic.
Ah, hello there. Now, unfortunately, our swordsmen are going to take the brunt of this initially, so what we're going to do is we're going to move our barding herd round to the side. We should have another unit of cretins here. Here they are. Let's move them round to the side there. What's going on here?
They're trying to rush you. Sometimes the AI thinks that it's got more of a chance if it meets you in the field rather than allows you to come through the gate.
I don't think that's going to be correct.
It never is, but the AI, unfortunately, as we've already discussed, is quite dumb.
A little bit dim. Right, let's pepper the enemy with a few arrows here. I think because I'm in windowed mode, I'm struggling a little bit to turn the camera.
Yes. There's a way around that, and I can't remember it. Yeah, because it thinks you're leaving the window when you move your mouse to the sides, so it stops paying attention. So you can turn the camera if you take the mouse just before the very edge. Yeah.
Yes, I see. Okay, right. I'm with it now.
But if you take it all the way to the edge, it essentially leaves your window and does nothing.
Right, let's just have our archers shoot a little bit further away because I'm probably getting massacred as a result of my own actions. These fine gentlemen have just decided to face the wall and accept their fate.
Their way of surrendering.
We like to call it the bottoms-up men. But now that we're actually looking at a settlement, do you have many unique settlement kind of views, if you will, or scenes that you see during the battles?
We've got quite a few unique ones, although I must confess this is where Dak falls down. For all, I believe, of the unique settlements in the game are created by other mods, and we just ask for permission.
That doesn't make it fall down at all. I think collaborating with other mods is one of the best things that you can do.
Oh, I certainly agree. The quality of Leo's mods are outrageous, but almost all of the custom settlements are either created by the base team, so the Third Age team, and I don't know who amongst their team was their settlement creator, but most of the ones we've added since were added by a Brazilian man called Leo.civil.uefs. That's how I've always known him, because that's his Total War Center name.
I see.
But he created phenomenal models. So most of the models in DAT, like Barad-dûr, Goblin Town, Zagkala, Dane Falls, every single dwarven settlement essentially, so many. He added at least 1.5 times those that were already present with Third Age, and we asked for his mods and he was happy to give them, and I know how to add them in, so I added them in.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, he's made some great battle maps.
Yeah, I think collaboration, it's very important for any mod, because unless you've got a vast group of in-house modelers, it can be very, very difficult to get assets out in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, something that we used to have a lot of members. DAC couldn't move for members, but in the past few years, as with many mods related to Medieval 2, modders just go. They just stop. It seems to be a plague amongst all of the sub-mods in Third Age, but we're still flying the banner. But our greatest competitor, Moss, has long since been dead. But anyway, that's by the by. So there used to be a lot of members, and certain people could do certain things, and they could all assist each other. There was a lot of talk, a lot of discussion, and if you couldn't do something, there's bound to be someone who could. But nowadays, we're so limited by the fact that we just can't do everything, and it does create great problems.
Lord, what's happening over here?
Collaborating.
We've got some Dalian swordsmen who are just right over here. What are they doing? Oh well. No wonder they're getting wrecked. Look.
They got a little too eager.
Damn drunkards. Let's just soften a couple of these fine gentlemen up and shoot my men in the process.
Now, Galu, are those Royal Archers decent in melee combat?
They are.
Yeah, the Royal Archers are very good.
Yeah, you could send them in as well.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I could. Let's just send them in that general direction.
Good tidings.
Oh,
The enemy general
it appears that we've
lies
murdered the general, which is always nice. Now, since we're on the subject of kind of how many mods, or modders I should say, that you have in your group, I'd like to ask both of you, if you wouldn't mind. It's always been my firm opinion that the modders are the real stars of the show. How you both individually came to join DAC.
Well, Initially, I am just a very big fan of Lord of the Rings, as many people know. I know a great deal about the lore. I can read and write Sindarin. But and so when I was at university, my flatmate told me of a game that let you play Lord of the Rings in a Total War setting, because I was always a fan of Total War. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. I'm going to look this up. And I looked it up and basically avoided 2 days worth of lectures and just played the hell out of it. And then in time, my favourite, as I'm sure we'll probably get onto as well, my favourite aspect of Lord of the Rings has always been Dol Amroth, and I came across Divide and Conquer, which has Dol Amroth as a faction, and immediately I was like, I've got to get hold of this. And when I first discovered it, it wasn't actually released. So being the sneaky little bugger that I am, I thought, well, the only way I'm going to be able to play this then is if I join the modding team. So I basically just annoyed the mod leader at the time, who was called Emperor of Hell. And I just badgered him enough until he eventually let me join as a writer, because I did a couple of writing pieces for him, and back then the entire team was European, or I should say continental European, because we're European as well, let's be honest. But and so none of them spoke English as a first language, so he asked me if I could look over things, address the problems, and I did. And then with mod members then leaving slowly, I then started taking on more and more responsibility, until eventually even Emperor of Hell stepped down and I was the only person left. So I became the de facto leader, and here we are.
And how about yourself, Dwarf, Elite Dwarf?
I joined, well, after version 1 was released. around the time or before version 1 was released, I got an itching to play a dwarven-related game, and my mind immediately went snapped to Divide and Conquer because I played version 0.5 back in the day, and I hadn't played Third Age or DAC 0.5 in a long while. So to my pleasant surprise, when I went to look it up on Total War Center, I saw that version 1 was about to release or just had released. So I started playing that. Played a few campaigns, obviously, as Kingdom of Khazad-dûm, and then I played a Northern Dunedain campaign and some others here and there. And then I decided, well, it'd be cool if I could, see if I could maybe make a battle map, perhaps edit the Khazad-dûm East battle map. So I was looking into that, and I was experimenting with that. And then I was watching, at the time, Arachîr's, Galu's videos, and in one of the videos, he mentioned how he wanted a Enedwaith aggression script to essentially, by turn 25, force Enedwaith to declare war on its neighbors. So then I thought, well, hey, I have some coding background, let me see if I can script something. And so I created an Enedwaith script. I then emailed or messaged through Total War Center Galu. I was like, hey, just so you know, I saw that you needed an Enedwaith script, so I made one for you. And then he goes, thanks, but we already found someone to do that for us.
Oh.
So he turned me down, so I was like, damn, okay. So I just went back to experimenting here, and then I did experiment more with the scripting, doing some tests here and there. And then not long later, I was watching one of Galu's videos, and he was talking about how he replaced the battle map for Gundabad from like the mountain peak with the 2 dwarven statues to be the one made by Leo Civil that had the actual fortress structure from the movies, from the Hobbit movies. So I saw that, and then I just got a weird idea in my head saying, hey, why don't you go try and make a strategy model, campaign map model for the settlement, because I really love playing on the campaign map. I love the kingdom management aspect. It's the majority of what I play during the game. So I thought, well, hey, let me see if I can do this and try that out. And I started researching and whatnot, and found out how to do it. And thanks to a friend of mine, Interes from Steam, who also happened to be the settlement modeler for Westeros Total War, I was able to ask him some questions here and there about file conversion and whatnot. And then I just started, drew Gundabad from scratch, line by line,
wow.
Polygon by polygon. I used the models, the pre-existing models, but I made the fortress structure itself. And then I just started PMing Galu, showing him the screenshots. He made some suggestions, add more this, make it do this, make it look like that. Then I eventually found out how, textured and whatnot, presented it to him, he liked it. And then I thought, well, let me try and do something Dwarven related. And I decided to work on the Erebor Mountain. And then I just kept on working, making some changes here and there. And then eventually by version 1.1, a couple of my models made it in. And then he invited me to join the testing team, not the official DAC team, but like the sub-team testing team. And then that's when I started.
He made you work for it, didn't he?
Yeah. Thankfully, around the time that I joined the testing team was when I went on break, so I had a lot of free time. And then Galu told me, hey, we're going to release version 1.2, and then after that, we don't know how long it's going to be until the next version. So I thought, oh crap, I better get to work and add more detail. And then that's when I just started working on all the models, just started burning through it, posting them up on TWC in our private group, got feedback from other people, and just kept on enhancing them and going forth. And that's after version 1.2 launched, I was then invited to officially join the official DAC team, and that's my whole story.
Okay, so how many active developers are now on the team at present?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. There are potentially and theoretically 5 members of the team. There's myself and Hummingbird, my long-standing companion, EliteDwarf, very recent, and then 2 others, one called Orp Scrape and one called Calatharok. And The Orb Scrape has just come back, actually. He said he was away for the reason that most modders are away, the overarching bracket of personal reasons. And he was away for a good couple of months. But Calatharok did a lot of work for us. And he is, in fact, the reason that Khazad-dûm script works. But then he also just disappeared without any word. But then he has also since come back. So potentially 5 members, but on a more active basis, probably 4.
Yes. We can go no
I see.
further,
Okay,
Lord.
so not a very large team, to be honest. I'm actually surprised to hear it's such a small team that's putting out such good work. Right, it looks like financially we are in the proverbial toilet, which is a bit unfortunate. Let's stop trying to recruit units because that is not doing us any favours at present.
That unfortunately is my doing.
Yes.
I set Dale to be incredibly poor. Given that at the start of this game, what is it, 2980? Oh, you don't have the date in the bottom left corner. Dale would have been very poor because Esgaroth is being rebuilt after the destruction, and Dale is also being rebuilt.
Was indeed a ruin when they moved in, and got further ruined by a couple of orky friends.
So we made Dale very financially poor at the beginning, and by pulling your army out of that fort that we spoke of, you unfortunately sealed your monetary doom, because the only reason you were ever making money at turn 1 is by having the free upkeep that the fort gives.
Hey,
So
you guys.
that's my devious mind, I'm afraid.
Go back to the
We
fort.
shall continue tomorrow. We can go no
You get
further,
4
my
free
lord.
upkeep in a fort, regardless of who they or what they are, and it's a massive way of saving money.
You by yourself. Go to the other
Camp
fort.
here.
And if you zoom into the forts, you'll see that we have custom campaign map fort models, and
Now, these are dwarven forts, aren't they?
They are indeed.
That's quite interesting. So, by virtue of its proximity to Erebor, you've chosen to make these dwarven forts in spite of the fact that they're owned by Dale. I like that.
Yes, yeah. Mostly because the generic Northmen fort we didn't edit, because I do quite like it, but there weren't very many instances of the Dwarven fort dotted around the map, so I felt that was a good place to add them.
plus it's more of a goodwill gesture by the dwarves to help out their friendly neighbors to the south. So it's not lore breaking at all.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. And I think having had Erebor here in the past, prior to Smog, of course, taking up residence, it wouldn't have surprised me in any way, shape or form if dwarven forts were dotted around the area. It would have been a kind of quite a useful thing for the dwarves to have. Right, we're going to send our friendly spy down there, who's looking mighty fine. And, well, I suppose we better end the turn and reap the financial rewards. Oh no. Right, we've been talking about yourselves a little bit, but we should probably get back to the meat and potatoes of DAC itself. Now, you're probably going to hamstring me for this, but it's fair-ish to say that there are 4 kind of main protagonist races in Middle-earth. I am grouping goblins, orcs, uruks all together, just for the purpose of this. I know I shouldn't do, but generally speaking, there are humans, elves, dwarves, and naughty orky things that speak in Cockney accents. Are there any ways that that you feel that they're kind of like best defined from each other, and what kind of play styles would you be exploring if you want to be one of those specific races?
Yeah, but yeah, there's clear, I think personally,
Yes,
clear
my
differences
lord.
between the 4. So, as a general overview, the orcs are almost all orc nations
my lord.
are all about numbers. So your units are weak. They're very weak. They run away easily. They can't stand up against anything, but they're cheap, and you can get an awful lot of them. And that's the way to victory. It's just swamping your enemies so they can't do anything. And then on the extreme opposite end of the scale are the elves. So obviously at this time period, realistically, the elves are all departing through Mithlond. They're heading to Aman, and that's kind of reflected in that the elves have very small battalions. They're well, not very small. They have smaller battalions. They're also very hard to get. They replenish very slowly, so it might be 25 turns
Yes, my
between
lord.
training. And they're also very expensive. So
Yes.
the orcs focus on numbers, and the elves focus on small, incredibly elite units. So one elven battalion, as many people will have seen, people always like posting their elven heroic victory stories, and elven armies can gain outrageous kill-death ratios. And then the kind of in-between ones are the dwarves. The focus of almost all the dwarf nations is essentially being stalwart, being steadfast. Their defense is always very high, and their morale is the best amongst anything. So dwarves just don't run away. but they're not as good as the elves. So the elves in a 1-for-1 will always take the dwarves down, but the dwarves are very defensive. There aren't very many of them, and they have no real fear. And then finally, the humans are what humans are in almost all sci-fi and fantasy, really. They're the kind of jack of all trades. They do a bit of everything. They don't do anything particularly well, but they do a little bit of everything, and that's the same role we've given them in Divide and Conquer. So you would like the best human archers are good, but they're nowhere near as good as the best elven archers, and like the best human like defensive units are good, but they're nowhere near as good as the best dwarven units. And the humans can never hope to have the numbers of the orcs, so they're just kind of the jack of all trades, master of none, to use the old phrase.
I see. Okay. Now we're also in kind of there are factional variations between factions as well. If you'd like to pickle, yes, if you'd like to pickle them, and send them to me via the post, I would be happy to consume them. But no, if you'd like to pick a couple of different factions, perhaps of the same race, are there any striking differences that you might find as a player between any of them?
Well, yeah, there's the differences in the factions is quite apparent. The only factions who are really almost bang on identical, and we've done the best we can to not make them bang on identical, are Lindon and Imladris. Lindon and Imladris, both obviously elven nations, and they are essentially carbon copies. One has silver colouring, one has gold, and that's about the difference. The Lindon faction does have slightly different units, but on the whole, they're basically the same. But within the branches of the different races, as you already pointed out, we do try and have differences. So, for example, as many people will know, if you play as Dol Amroth, you get very, very elite units, but they're very, very expensive. Whereas if you were to play as Bree, you get very, very cheap units, but they're nowhere near as good as the Dol Amroth equivalent. So there's like an elite human faction and an average human faction, and then of course Rohan are an incredibly cavalry heavy faction, as are Khand, and there's that kind of theme runs through. But as I say, with the elves and the dwarves, it's quite difficult to make them separate from one another, and they do all play very, very similarly. Unfortunately, there's no real way around it, but we have done what we can. So there are various stat changes here and there. There's units that are only available to Erebor, there's units only available to Ered Luin. But on the whole, the elves and the dwarves are all very, very similar.
I see. Okay, now one thing that I did want to ask, and this kind of harks back to kind of almost gameplay limitations, if you like, is I think it's fair to say that that gameplay is more important than lore when it comes to a mod or a computer game. Lore is very, very important, and you strike me as the kind of gentleman that lore would play an important feature too. However, are there any particular places that you've had to sacrifice a bit of lore in order to allow for improved gameplay?
Yes, there are. The absolute standout, although most people don't really think of it because, as you say, many people aren't all that interested, but the main one is famous generals. So the game starts in the year 2980, and as many of you will know, if you play as Gondor, you get both Boromir and Faramir as generals, whereas in the lore, Faramir isn't even born in 2980, and Boromir is, I believe, 1 year old. So we have to stretch it a little bit there to get them both in. The same with Éomer. Éomer's not supposed to be there yet. Same thing with Theodred. So that's a big break from the lore that you can't get around, because everyone wants Éomer and Theodred, and everyone wants Boromir and Faramir and that kind of thing. But the other thing is, the biggest break I would consider is the elves. The elves shouldn't really partake. And we do try and cover that by making them quite passive. But realistically speaking, they would never really be factions. But they're too fun to play as, so why would you not have them?
Looks like Isengard have made friends with the Ents. That's nice. Right. Are there any elements that the community has expressed a desire to see that you've had to say no to because you feel it would be detrimental to either a faction's gameplay or the gameplay in general? I think you know what I'm aiming at here.
Yes, there is one thing that we get asked quite a lot, and the movies did absolutely nothing to help this, but that's bloody goat cavalry. But not just goat cavalry itself, but just cavalry. As I've I can't think of the word I want to use. As I've said over and over and over and over and over, we know from the lore, dwarves don't really trust cavalry. They don't like horses. They don't ride them if they can afford it, and they never, ever trust them in battle.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd never ride anything, and so we don't give the dwarves cavalry. That's the first point. Second point about the dwarven cavalry, because I will take this opportunity to moan about it. Lord of the Rings doesn't have big megafauna goats that would take the weight of a dwarven warrior. So where these goats are even coming from is beyond me as well, is the other point. But then thirdly, and perhaps really the real point, is that if the dwarves had cavalry in DAC, their faction would have no weaknesses. They would just be the most boring, easy campaigns in the world. So you don't get cavalry, so you have to think of other ways to run down those annoying skirmishers that constantly throw javelins at you, run away, and then stick their tongues out. You have to find another sneaky way of killing them because you don't get cavalry. And that feature tries to play through. We try and make all the factions separate, and we get asked an awful lot. The quote is essentially like, "Oh, Gondor doesn't have this, so I think you should add it." But that's never a reason to add something, because then all the nations would just be clones of one another, and there'd be no differences. So if you want to play, you want to murder everything in your path with easy cavalry hit and runs, then play as Rohan or Dol Amroth. And if you want lines and lines of indestructible warriors on foot, then play as the dwarves. So we have to say no to a lot of things just to keep some sort of identity between the factions.
Yes, and some kind of semblance of balance is also it's a beneficial thing.
Yeah, certainly
I've really found with the Dunedain that you can get some absolutely magnificent victories with them. They at present they're my favourite faction to play.
Yeah, I do quite like the Dunedain. They've had an awful lot of work put into them, and part of that is probably guilt, because we get asked again on the same sort of theme. Oh, Arnor was in the base game. Why is it not in DAC? And so to sort of alleviate that guilt, we have made the Northern Dunedain completely unique, and their Beacon of Hope system is no one else has anything like it.
Mm-hmm.
So they are quite. I think they're fun as well. I really do like them, and I personally don't want Arnor, but there we are. And as I'm kind of the dictator of this whole thing, you'll have to like it or lump it.
Well, I think you visually you've got a fair amount of Arnorian influence with the Dunedain, particularly in the following the Barracks event. They've got a lot of Arnorian looking units anyway, so if people want that visual glut of Arnorian stylings, then they can go with that particular faction and be satisfied, I think.
There's a clear distinction to the Barracks event, especially with the addition of the new models that Elite Dwarf has provided. So if you play as a Northern Dunedain, when you build a town or a large town, it just has a really basic wooden look. But then when you build a city and a large city, it has the Gondorian circle of stone, and all of their UI buildings then change to the Gondorian UI as well. So they do have that kind of shift to Arnor. There just isn't an event that happens at a point that says, "Well done, you're now Arnor," and that's
Actually, speaking about Northern Dunedain, their wall placement and their towers are a little bit more unique. Well, mainly the towers, since you wanted that unique.
We'll just zip over actually and see if there are any. If there's going to be nothing visual.
Toggle Fog of War.
Yeah.
Numinas Numinas is certainly unique, and so is Kamath Bryn.
If you're wondering how I do this, ladies and gentlemen, and you've never taken the opportunity to flagrantly cheat on Medieval 2 Total War, you just press the tilde key in the US, which is usually at the top left. And
go south a bit.
Oh yes, where am I?
Go south,
just to the base of the lake.
Here we are, Numinous. Yes.
That's that settlement model. I've jumped on the Elite Dwarf's toes, but he created it. But that is only present for the Northern Dunedain.
It is, and I think that you've got a castle up here for Nostarion, have you? Yes.
Yes, I do have to give a large shout out to Leo.civil.uefs because he originally had a strat model design that had those buildings and some unique things. So when I was planning out the new chain for both Gondor and Northern Dunedain, I extracted some pieces, edited them here and there, retextured some things here and there, and then I just put them together and formed those new models. So I built off of his textures. So a lot of the time I saved by doing that greatly helped the production prior to the release of 1.2. So a large shout out is owed to him for that. But
I really do like their particular style. They've got kind of almost offset towers, haven't they, which is nice.
Yes, I definitely definitely like fortifications, castles, and all that type of stuff. So I wanted to make them more unique and make them look much more cooler than the vanilla-based game.
And there's not only that, there's actually unique assets as well, isn't there, for particular towns? I think we're coming up to Bree over here, so we'll take a look at that. This is a unique settlement.
Yes. So that would be... So basically we have the generic settlements and we have the unique settlements. The unique settlements are the one-off, so you only get one of it, one location of it, one example. And then the generic settlements are what that faction's generic settlement chain from village to town, large city, large city, as well as the 3 tiers of castle. So that would be the difference between that. And so as you can see, Hobbiton is different, and you won't see that anywhere else, as well as the town of Bree. Other examples are obviously like, the Black Gate, Barad-dûr, and whatnot.
I think since we're fairly local to it, we can have a look at Amon-Sul, which is the there we go, the destroyed watchtower of old.
Yeah. If you head further to the east as well, you can see a Northern Dunedain generic castle just there in the north of your picture, Cameth Bryn.
There it is.
That's what. So once the Dunedain get to upgrading their castles, they start looking like that.
So this would be the second tier, would it, the castle?
Hover over it.
Yes,
because
it has...
or a stronghold. Oh yeah, because it's only got the one tower. Yeah.
It has the one tower, yeah, so you can distinguish it. So the Northern Dunedain / Arnor settlements, their towers are like the towers along the walls are square, whereas if you go down to Gondor, you'll see that they're more circular. And plus, their cities, large cities, and their 2 upper castle chains have the large towers protruding from them. So.
There we go. In fact, since we've got a unique here, let's take a look at Minas Tirith itself. Lovely jubbly.
Yep.
I think these are new assets as well, aren't they? The beacons.
Yeah, I created the beacons of Gondor. I just thought, well, it would be a cool feature to have.
I like it. I do really like
space
that.
for it. So, yeah.
A couple of other uniques, of course, both Western and Eastern Osgiliath. They make up uniques.
Yeah, the ruined version. But then when you rebuild them, it'll have the new and upgrade version.
You can rebuild it.
Yeah, you can rebuild them. Yeah,
I'm finally gonna play as the good guys.
Yeah, you have to get them to a population of 3,000.
Yeah,
and then you're able to rebuild them. And then when you rebuild them, I think it'll be definitely worth it, especially with the new 1.2 version.
Oh, that is super duper cool. I will have a go at that. And here is my absolute favourite settlement, Minas Morgul as it's called here, but not its original name. I love the style of this settlement. It's quite a challenging one to attack, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
The battle map for this particular one, because they've got such high arching towers, those towers can't be destroyed as standard kind of ballista towers would be, and yet the AI like to target them regardless. So it makes for a good light show, but it's a perfect position to just kind of stick your pikemen in and then just watch everybody die terribly. And if the enemy are coming at you with cavalry, which I believe this is a bit of a bone of contention, isn't it? You can use your stakes.
Yes, stakes are currently in discussion. We've already decided. Stakes are going to be restricted to one unit per faction, sometimes 2.
Oh, I see.
We did plan on removing them altogether. Both Hummingbird and myself were in favour of that, although I was kind of on the fence because I do like someone getting them. But then as many people said, why bother removing them? If people personally think they're overpowered, then they just won't use them. And if people do want to use them, then they can use them. And I was like, yeah, that's fair enough. But then certain factions in the game are completely nullified by the use of stakes. So we wanted to at least make you have to work to get stakes. So they're going to be restricted to 1 unit.
I can understand that. I think they're fairly restricted for Gondor, from what I can remember. I think it's only the Rangers that can have them.
But they're restricted, even in this one, they are still restricted in that only elite archers get them. So normally archers after the barracks event or Rangers. But we are going to restrict them, as I say, still further. And in many cases, actually, now archers aren't even going to be able to place them. It's moving on to weird, interesting units for each faction.
So yeah, that's the first strategy model that I made for
Gundabad.
Divide and Conquer. Yeah.
Magnificent. I do like Gundabad. There's something quite lovely about it. I imagine the people who've been there who aren't orcs would probably disagree with me, but there's something I've always liked about the Gundabad. I think there's another interesting Karandum.
Karandum is one of Leo's, so that's one that we took from another mod.
I do like it.
Yeah, so there's still a lot of stuff that that came from other mods, that came from the base Third Age, and then a lot of new stuff. A lot of my stuff focuses on the generic settlements and upgrading those to be either brand new or much more detailed and unique, since the majority of the time you're going to be settling generic settlements. So
Thranduil's Halls. Yeah. This has recently been updated as well, hasn't it, to allow it that kind of wall at the front?
Yes. Originally it was sunk into the ground and you couldn't see the pillars. So I initially raised it up, and then I thought, well, what if I just add some more trees, make it blend in a little bit more? So I did that, and then I thought, well, let me make it stand out a little bit more, and added rock detail around the entrance just so it stands out completely.
I like it. I think it's a very beneficial change. I was actually playing as Rune while I firmly believed that it was on 1.2, and I wouldn't take no for an answer, even though it was at 1.1. And yes, I can see the difference there immediately. Now, right, we're back with our own lovely people here. After having taken a trip around the map, we will turn Fog of War back on. Otherwise, when I end the turn, things will happen forever, and we'll never get anywhere. Although, having looked at our deficit, I think we might struggle regardless. I've made a bit of an error. I think is probably the realistic way of putting this. Something of a tactical error. Now, since we're actually looking at Dale and Erebor at the moment, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, since The Hobbit came out, are there any visual stylings or visual cues that you've chosen to take from The Hobbit? And have you upgraded the skins of any units in order to better reflect that?
Yes, we have indeed. Ever since The Hobbit came out, obviously there's been a massive cry for dwarven units that look like the dwarves and elven units that look like Thranduil's units. And another mod, again, actually did create both of those things. So the dwarves were created by someone called... Oh, I can't remember his name. It was so long ago. And he created the base dwarven unit, and then many other modders have come in and edited it, and dare I say, improved upon it, because his models were very basic. But they did look exactly as they did in the film, and they're the base that now almost everyone uses, so kudos to him, although I've forgotten his name. And then the elves were created by about 3 different modders over about a 9-month period. And it took them so long, and eventually I stepped in and I said, look, I've got a texture, because they created the model but they didn't have any textures, and I said, I've got a guy who can do the textures, and you've done all the models, and it doesn't look like you're going to be releasing anytime soon, so can I possibly have what you've taken? We'll finish them, and then we'll release them individually, and I'll put them in DAC.
Very nice.
So they did that. So our very own Hummingbird, who is our current unit modeler, texture, and basically all things unit, he finished the elves off, and then another user on Total War Center then touched them up even more and made them look even nicer, and then now we've got the finished product. So yes, the long story short, if you play as the elves of Thranduil, you get an awful lot of looks from the Hobbit movie, and if you play as Erebor and you upgrade your armor at a blacksmith,
that's why I've got this open, because you spoke about the FAQ section earlier, so I thought I thought I'd allow you to take a look at this particular fine gentleman here and these fine particular gentlemen here, and tell us the difference.
Yeah, so the picture on the left is what the unit looks like when you first recruit it, as long as you haven't built a blacksmith. That's what they look like in Third Age Total War. They're unchanged. And the image on the right is what they will look like when you upgrade them at a blacksmith. So they get that really iconic red shield that everyone bangs on about. And the King's Warriors only get a sort of chainmail look. But the units that come after the barracks event have that kind of heavy dwarven armor that you see Dane's troops arrive in the battle in. So it's that kind of plate mail look. The more elite units get those. So I think they're called King's Axes of Erebor, and the Crossbowmen.
The Axes of Erebor, they're a magnificent unit. They can stand forever and a day. Right. What other questions do I have? I've got absolutely tons of questions for you, and I feel sorry for you to have to ask everything forever. Now, I was going to ask about scripts, but I think we've covered them fairly effectively already, so I'll move on to the next question. Now, are there any campaign map visuals that you would like to kind of aim to change in the future at all that you haven't yet got to, Elite Dwarf?
Yes, there's a lot. Like I said previously, when I was working on the models prior to version 1.2, I was working with the deadline of when 1.2 was going to be released. So now that it's done, I aim to work on all the other models that I didn't get to work on. So I plan to update essentially everything from Minas Tirith to Barad-dûr, fix up some more generic settlements. I even plan to, hopefully, if I can get the battle maps working for them, I hope to make a more obvious distinction between Rohan settlements, Dorwinian settlements, Dale settlements, so that Rohan is more I guess basic and rustic, and then Dale has more advanced settlements for both the battle map as well as the campaign map, because at the moment they both share the same structure. And as you can see, if you go around the map, one thing that I'm proud of in regards to how the models have worked out is when you go from a village to a town as like a logical upgrade. So the size stays relatively the same, but it just has the wall around it. Then when you go from the town to the large town, the wall upgrades a bit, but it doesn't really expand as much, to give the effect of, like, the townspeople just pushing down the old palisade wall, adding a stone base.
Go down to Rohan and look at the towns of Onodrith and then Aldburg, because that's what Elite Dwarf's currently talking about.
Here we go.
Onodrith is a smaller town, or Tirith Anduin will do.
Oh, here we go. Here it is.
So that's the smaller one, and then directly south of that, the town of Aldburg is the next one up, and it will show you what Elite's talking about.
Oh, come on, Aldburg. Oh, look.
Left a bit.
Left. Here we are.
There you go. And so, basically, that one, they've improved the walls, but kept the same shape. The inside, the buildings get more compact, and they're chaotic. So that when you see that, you can see the clear difference between that and Gondor, which has much more organized and properly laid out city planning. And then as well with the large town is
I quite like the fact that you've got things on the outside.
Exactly. I wanted to give the effect of the inside got packed, so then people start settling outside. So then when you upgrade to the city, the stone walls change, it gets a bit bigger, the buildings inside get a bit taller, and there's nothing outside. And then when you upgrade to the large city, then everything increases, but then there's like settlements on the outside as well. So to give it a more natural and clear sort of progression between the settlements.
I don't think we do have any cities, do we, at present to look at, sadly.
No, if you want, you can go back to your domain and look at the village of Grasgard. It's a bit left.
Here, oh no, here, yes.
Right there. If you want, you can use the cheats to add population, and then to use the process CQ cheat to update the walls, and then
you've gone beyond my understanding, sir.
If you hit the tilde to access the console.
All right, let's go.
I would suggest you rename the settlement to a single letter, because it speeds up the process immensely.
That seems entirely reasonable. I don't know how to do that either, but I'll
click on the building tab.
Whoop.
So where you'd build structures from, and then click on the word Grasgard and change it to. I always choose the letter A, but feel free to choose any you will.
Z it is.
And then just press enter and click away. Yeah, and then now that town's called Z, so it makes it a lot easier to cheat.
Okay, so I presume I'd want to something like this.
Yep.
Add population and just type in 5,000.
Yeah. Maximum it lets you add is 4,000. But anything, any number above it will just do 5,000. Do that a couple of times. So press the up key on your keyboard. And yeah.
That should do the job.
You do know what you're doing. You lied to us.
I'm very good at cheating in other games. I haven't come across it very much in this one.
You're going to need to add money to yourself as well, I'm afraid. Which is on the. And then you can add 40,000 at a time. But I'd suggest you do it twice.
How much money do you want me to have?
The payoff is worth it because you get to see the pure progression.
I've made an error.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
And then you need to open the construction tab, build the building, and then open the console again.
Oh lord.
And then type process _CQ space Z. Then press enter.
Oh look.
And it upgrades. And then you can do that for the next 4 tiers, and you'll see the full progression of the.
I think we should do that. So let's just come out of that. Z is now bigger. He's progressed a little bit. And let's take a look at a large town upgrade. Come out of here.
So what I did for the cities is I made the central like city hall. Whenever it expands, I added more detail to them. So I added like buildings on the extensions out of it. I've added a little bit towers and whatnot, like a bell tower. So just if you look at the city hall area as well, that has more detail and more logical progression rather than just random buildings.
These guys are very disappointed with my rule.
Yeah, they don't like this because the squalor gets really high.
They don't like change.
There's 40,000 people there now, and there used to be 600. So they're a little bit annoyed at your immigration policy.
So as you can see, there's a little bit buildings outside the gate, but nothing too extreme.
Oh, I actually really like the progression of this. I'm not sure that I've seen this particular cityscape before. Let's go for a large city.
Oh.
No, you shouldn't have done. This is all entirely new, created by EliteDwarf for 1.2.
That'll be why then. And let's take a look at our large city, which has now got kind of an almost fortress at the back there. It's got a keep.
Yeah. Technically, to go along with like the word citadel, having a little fort next to like the city. So that's what I went with, and so yeah, that's how I made it stand out a little bit more, just to add more detail. And then as you can see, there's more buildings on the outside. So so that's essentially what Dale, Darwinian, and Rohan have right now. But hopefully in the future 2.0 version, Rohan will have completely different looking models compared to Dale and Darwinian.
Oh, that'll be really nice. One thing that I am going to put you on the spot with is I do recognise that many towns, cities, etc., they can get ballista towers at a later stage. Generally speaking, I found in most mods and for this particular game, they don't have any visual impact on the city. Is there a way of making them have a visual impact?
No, there isn't.
Oh, that's a shame, isn't it?
Unfortunately, the only way to change the settlement model is to upgrade the town.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can't do anything. You can't do any post additions. That's why the unique settlements, they can't change at all. The only way we got the Osgiliath settlements to upgrade is by allocating the files to allow for that. But it takes up other slots, so it's just one of those limitations where we have to work within the file structure and do what we can within the file structure. Thankfully, we're able to make unique settlement chains per faction rather than per culture group. So at least that we're able to do that. But as far as making 3D visual changes, by adding ballista towers or whatnot, that's unfortunately not possible.
I see. Oh, it's interesting to note. I need to toggle Fog of War off, otherwise things are going to be going terribly. Because what will happen is you will see all the AI do their thing, which would take about 36,000 years, judging by the amount of factions that we have. Give or take, of course. There might be a slight variance in pricing scheme there. Now, you've mainly covered this, I believe, in the questions that we've already approached here. But as a team, kind of, what are your goals for the next release? Do you have any key goals that you think, okay, I want to do this, this, and this before it's ready to be pushed out?
Well, personally, the goal that I want the most is to abuse EliteDwarf before he too gets bored and leaves us like everyone else has done. And because, as he says,
I'll go and get my violin.
It's entirely possible to. Everybody left me. There was a period where I was the only modder for a good, I think it was about a year and 2 months. So, anyway, but that's by the by. As he's already said, every single nation can have their own generic settlement look. So as you've just gone through Grasgard, town, large city, town, large town, city, large town, but every single town could have a unique one of those because the file structure allows for it. So whilst the battle maps would all be the same, so Rohan's large town would look like Dale's large town, the campaign strategy model can be different, and there's no stopping you. You can have a different one for every single faction. Oh, wow. And whilst there's no need to do that, like obviously Linden and Imladris would always be the same, dwarves would always be the same, there's no need to do that. But for certain nations it certainly has a good impact. Like Umbar and Khand are actually incredibly different nations, and they wouldn't have the same towns, the same cities. So there are certain nations that we really would like to get a more unique approach. Khand and Rohan are actually two of them because they're so cavalry-orientated factions. We want to get that in how they look. But so that is a massive part of what I hope to do. Obviously, it's not even me. That's TheEliteDwarf. I'm just using.
Would I be correct in thinking that the Khand are primarily nomadic?
Yes, well, we know nothing about them. We literally know nothing except from Middle-earth is essentially based on a kind of our world, so almost like a Pangea level of history, if you are familiar with Pangea, the Great Continent.
It's before the Continental Divide, everything was kind of crushed together.
Yes, yeah, and Middle-earth is almost sort of suggested to be a prehistory of our own planet. So England and Northern Europe is about where the Shire is. So we know, therefore, that the Easterlings of Rhûn and are far to the east. They represent kind of the more Middle Eastern nations, and Harad are more the kind of African nations. So, and by extension, therefore, we've suggested that Khand are essentially Mongolians, and they're entirely based on that. But there is only a single sentence that mentions Khand in the books, and we've made a whole faction out of it. So, a little bit of artistic license.
Well, we do like a bit of artistic license.
Well, is that the phrase where we've taken not liabilities? What's the word?
Liberties?
Liberties. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've basically guessed what their backstory is. The same as with Dorwinian. Dorwinian actually is kind of like my little child, for their entire backstory was written and created by me. And
do you know, I didn't know that. Dorwinian are the wine merchants, aren't they?
Yeah, that is all we're given in the lore. We know that they sell wine to the elves.
Here they are, in fact.
We know about them. So I took that and I based their entire faction off of wine. Their units are called Vintner and Vineyard.
They're kind of an interesting melding, aren't they? There's a bit of human, a bit of elf going on.
Yeah, they've got a unique script. So you get to choose whether to stay as Northmen or join the elves. And if you join the elves, you get elven-style units. So they're really expensive, but they're really good, but you don't get very many of them. And if you stay as human, you get a lot of units that you can get a lot of that aren't as good, but are slightly cheaper. So you can either go for the standard human numbers-esque approach, or you can change over to elven and get some really good elven units.
I think either way, they're in pretty serious trouble if they're an AI player, aren't they? Because of the ever-present threat of this would be the capital city of Rhûn over here, Mistrand or something of that ilk.
Yes, it is Mistrand. Yes. Yeah, the Dorwinian are one of the few AI nations that you can guarantee will be defeated if you don't help them.
Yes. Would it be fair to suggest that the Vale over here is another one of them? They seem to get crushed fairly quickly.
Yeah, the Vale are very good at defending, though, once they're really back to the wall. So they will lose a few provinces to the sheer might of Dol Guldur and Misty Mountains. But once they're really down to their last few settlements, the outrageous power of their general's unit and the general defensive nature of their units means they tend to survive, but by the skin of their teeth.
What's this?
That's the Karok, the famous crossing of the Anduin.
I like it.
We have... basically what we call monuments, but they're essentially just repurposed resources.
I see.
Because that's just one of the ways that in order to achieve this goal, we need to, that's how we need to use the framework for. So, like, as you can see, there's horses. Well, that's the Karok is, I think, camels in the game files, but we just changed, or whoever created it, that's what they had to do. They named it as camels, but then they changed the 3D model. So. But yeah, like Arachîr was saying, just to add my 2 cents, there's a lot of campaign map models that, he, for just reasons, he wants edited to just for the basic distinctual representation to make them more unique. But then there's also models that he may think not necessarily need to be, but just for my own purposes and my own personal goals, I definitely want to. For example, Minas Tirith, the model, the campaign map model, has no gate, and that's always bothered me deeply. So that's, like I said previously, my overall goal is to update essentially every model, and to just to have them be more, more detailed and have better textures. And then, in addition to the settlements, we're also going to be creating, or we have created, new resource models. So as you can see, the wine and the sheep and whatnot, I've made new models for all of those. So instead of it being a single sheep, it's a sheep, pasture. Instead of it being wine, like a wine glass, it's an actual wine vineyard plantation.
Oh, I see. That's going to be good.
And whatnot. Yep. So there's the village models are new. There's grain farms. There's fur trapping camps. So all those models are going to be a little bit more realistic and actually have settlements and buildings.
Would you be interested in changing out the tree models, and is that something you'd be able to do?
I know where the tree models are. I've never considered changing them out, but I know how to edit them.
Interesting.
Why? What do you suggest?
Oh no, I've got no suggestions. I was just wondering, kind of if you could get that in depth if you chose to. I do think. Yeah. I mean, there are things that you'd have an absolute nightmare with, aren't there? Like changing the texture patches for the land. Would that be worth it? I just don't know.
But it isn't personally possible. If you've ever played the PCP mod, which is another submod for Third Age, they have completely different land textures, and it looks like an almost different game.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether PCB has been an element in my life. No, I haven't actually played that mod, I must admit.
Right. I personally haven't played it either. It's a bit too out there for my taste, but that's not to say that the gentleman who created it really did well. The amount of people...
Is that the one with the dragons?
...be able to do it. Yeah. The dragons in particular. Yeah. There was the amount of backlash and people being really quite horrible, really, and telling him there's no way you're going to make dragons. You're basically an idiot for trying. And he did it. He did it completely on his own. He made the whole mod on his own, and he's quite an astounding figure in the community, to be honest.
I remember playing it back in the day, so that's amazing that you got that kind of reaction, because I know Call of Warhammer has flying mounts, so
yeah,
it is doable. Just gotta put the time into it.
I don't particularly like them, I must confess. I've never been a fan of them. I mean, I was the gentleman who removed spiders, and to be honest, if I could, I'd remove Ents as well, but I think too many people would moan.
They certainly would.
Someone actually on ModDB asked for a spider faction, so you should probably get on that, Galu.
A spider faction?
Oh,
yeah.
They're not well, are they? Bless them. Now then, right, there aren't many more questions that I've got, and the questions that I do have that remain, they're going to kind of focus on Total War as an entity, if you will. One thing that I did want to ask, just to see what your opinion was, more than anything else. I think most people who do play the Total War franchise have got their own fairly entrenched opinions about what I'm going to be asking. And it's now this is a total conversion for Medieval 2 Total War, which, as we've previously stated, it's 10 years old now. Bless it, I'll get it a little hat. Now, there have been, I think, five releases since of within the Total War franchise. And yet, I find that a lot of mods and a lot of modders still go back to Medieval 2 Total War in order to create some of these larger scale mods. There are a lot of mods out there for the newer ones, and I think they should never, ever be forgotten. But... what reason do you think the modders are still being pulled back to Medieval 2 Total War?
Because of the things that you can do. Obviously, the graphics are a little dated, but not so that your eyes hurt. I mean, it's not like 1980s level graphics. So it's still got that youthfulness. If that's really the word, it's probably not. But it is just, you can do anything in this one. apart from the hard-coded limits, which are only there just because, as you say, the game is old, there aren't really any restrictions. You can do what you want. If you want the map to look like to spell the word good luck, you can just write good luck with the map, and the map will look like good luck. Like, you can do anything. And of course, I mentioned the map specifically because one of the most known Lord of the Rings mods at the moment is Rise of Mordor for Attila. And it's famously restricted by the fact that Attila's campaign map cannot be edited. So Rise of Mordor is going to be a Lord of the Rings mod set in Europe, and it's going to look particularly baffling with the Mediterranean sitting where Gondor should be. So there's massive restrictions there, and I think that's why the freedom in Medieval 2 is there, and the ease of editing. I mean, you can do, I would suggest, 80% of the modding on Medieval 2 with Notepad++ and a variant of Photoshop, and that's it. I mean, all of the map editing is just done with I use GIMP because it's free and easy, and all of the map editing is done with that. All of the trees are just represented by green squares, and if you paint the green squares somewhere else, you get trees somewhere else. It's so simple.
Yes,
so easy
I imagine
to get
the
into.
height maps are just done via kind of a normal map.
Yeah, the same. Yeah, the height maps are represented by different shades of grey squares on an image, so it's all really easy. If you want to change where a river crossing is, it's just a case of putting a light blue square on a dark blue river line. It's all so simple. And as I say, on Notepad, I mean, to edit the stats of a unit is as simple as loading up the file that has the stats and changing it from 10 to 12. I mean, it's so basic. Whereas I think in the later games, it's starting to get a lot more convoluted, a lot harder to edit. And as we've already said, that you just can't edit certain things. I mean, at Shogun Total War 2, you can barely edit anything.
That's true, and I think that there have been even greater restrictions placed in the most recent incarnation of the Total War franchise, which is the Total War Warhammer or Warhammer Total War or whatever it is.
Correct.
Now, I don't inherently dislike that game. I think it's entirely reasonable. The gameplay's a lot faster when it comes to battles, but it's not unlikable. I think it's got a reasonable mass appeal. I think the elements of the market that may have been bored by long battles will probably prefer it, but modability is, I hate to say, from my particular perspective, absolutely in the toilet. Because of the particular deals that have been signed with Games Workshop, you're only allowed to include Warhammer content. So there's never going to be any content. I think particularly Lord of the Rings content is very, very taboo because of the fun that Games Workshop has had in the past with Lord of the Rings content. I consider that to be a crying shame, and I think I don't know if you'd agree with me, and please feel free not to. I personally believe that both Creative Assembly and Sega have done the modding communities a little bit of a disservice.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I would agree. But then, slightly unrelated, but obviously, as you asked at the beginning before we started recording, in my real life, I'm a trainee solicitor, and I've come across lots of legal different bits and bobs. So I can completely understand why they might be forced to do certain things. And we have to remember as well that game creators are game players, surely. So they too would want that freedom. You can't imagine a game creator. Yeah, so it must be something out of their control. And as I say, coming from a law background, it is out of their control. I mean, as a slightly tangent, but Westeros Total War, EliteDwarf mentioned it earlier, is based on Game of Thrones, and I know a few of the people that worked on that mod, or I know of it, and it was actually legal action was actually taken against that mod in order to stop it, so that it wouldn't cut into a profit that the whoever holds the rights to Game of Thrones were producing a Game of Thrones game. And before they produced the game, they tried to shut Westeros Total War down because it was going to take some of their fan base. And in the end, nothing came of it. And actually, quite interestingly as well, one of the lead modders in that mod is also a lawyer. And he completely shot their case out of the water, and it never went anywhere. But that's the same kind of thing that we've got now, as you say, with they've signed certain contracts with Games Workshop, and it's just restricting what they can do. But then it's not to say that they should restrict the other games, and I can't give you a valid reason why they've restricted map editing on Attila. I just don't understand it.
Well, I'm not sure that it's technically restricted. To my understanding, the tools just simply were never worked on and never made available.
Oh right. Oh, I'm not too au fait. I just know I don't even know if that means what I want it to mean. But anyway, sorry. I just know the leader of the Rise of Mordor mod. I've worked with him a lot in the past. He's called Mr. J.
Seems like a nice gentleman.
He used to be called Jocks when I knew him, and but anyway, I know him quite well. I've worked with him a lot, and that's why I know of Rise of Mordor, and I just know that they've got problems with the map editing, and it's really causing them grief.
It is a shame, and there's been a petition and a demand for years from the Attila community now to actually get a map editor on the go, but they're just, to my understanding, the creators just simply aren't willing to devote the time in order to create the necessary tools, which is, it's sad. It's a shame, because I think I couldn't possibly approach it from a financial perspective, but I think it's probably fair to suggest that the lifetime of many games, and not just the lifetime, but the purchasability, also not a word, is increased by giving it a greater reach to a wider audience, and that's exactly what the mod tools would have done.
Yeah, I can't say on how much it actually has impacted them, but Medieval 2, as you've said, is 10 years old, and it is still frequently purchased. Mm-hmm. And it's all because of the amount of mods. I mean, at the moment, if you want to play a really in-depth Lord of the Rings kind of grand strategy game, Third Age Total War is the only one. And it's a mod. It's a mod of a game. And it's just keeping Medieval 2 selling. So why they... In the same way why Skyrim embraces mods so much, because mods just keep Skyrim alive. And it's the same thing here. The mods have so much potential.
Yeah, there are various other games that have really benefited in the past. We know that Sins has benefited quite a lot, Sins of a Solar Empire. I think it's probably fair to say that, most of the recent Fallout games, they've benefited pretty heavily from mods.
Yeah.
And it does make their playability last significantly longer than they might otherwise do. I think Project Brazil is a very, very high-profile mod for New Vegas. And that's keeping people purchasing New Vegas now because of the hype that is surrounded by that mod and has done for a long time. So perhaps it's something for developers to think of in the future. I don't think they'll watch this video, but there we are. But is there anything else before I finally let you go that you'd like to talk about?
No, not especially. I mean, you did ask what we're going to do for the future, and before we started the video, we talked at length about the Reunited Kingdom, and I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but I suppose we might as well suggest that, yes, we're talking about the Reunited Kingdom. People have been asking for it for ages now, years, in fact. So we are finally talking about it. If our scripters stay on, or if indeed TheEliteDwarf has the level of knowledge that would need, and the time that would need, then we certainly will try and get the RK out there, but that's currently the main kind of flagship feature of version 2.0. So I suppose
the Reunited Kingdom, I presume, would be kind of Gondor and other human fellows uniting.
It would be Gondor and Arnor, and because I am as the community have dubbed me, a Dol Amroth fanboy, Dol Amroth wouldn't be integrated into the RK. They would be vassals, as would Bree. But the Reunited Kingdom from the lore is just when Aragorn ascended to the throne and Sauron is defeated and his spirit is set free. Spirit's set free. His spirit is banished. Aragorn does re-establish Arnor in the north and reforms the United Kingdom of Gondor and Arnor. And that is what it is based on. So that is what we would hope to do. So if you play as the Northern Dunedain, you would get Gondor's lands. They would become part of your lands. You then have to deal with their enemies and their problems and the quite challenging aspect of controlling a map-spanning empire, because your money takes problems. You get corruption left, right, and center. Units start even abandoning you when you get to a certain size. So there's a lot of different little problems that you've got to deal with. At the moment, we're not 100% sure if we're going to let Gondor trigger the script. We might keep it as Northern Dunedain only, but that is currently being discussed. That was one of the points that's open to discussion. I personally am in favour of it not being for Gondor, and it being an Aragorn-led only feature, because of course Gondor doesn't have an heir to their throne. Otherwise, they would have a king, and Aragorn
stands to reason.
So that's the Reunited Kingdom in a nutshell. We just got to work out the nuts and bolts,
the particulars of it.
Yeah,
there was something I wanted to look at somewhere around here before I took Toggle Fog of War off. Ah yes, it was this Northern Wastes up here. I've been the last playthrough that I did with Rune, I spent about 15 turns trying to work out how I could take it. I don't think I can I?
No, it's a special
region. Far right.
In the top right corner there's a village. I don't even think it has a name. can't remember, but it's used for scripts.
I see.
If you look just to the left there, you'll see a Dol Guldur general who's currently keeping Dol Guldur alive, but he's standing in impassable terrain, so he can't leave. But he is our solution to ensuring Dol Guldur can't be killed by regicide, because their faction leader, essentially, or a family member, is always present, even though he's in the corner and can't do anything.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
It's just a region that's used for scripts. Also, I'm pretty sure that the Pope himself resides in Forodwaith. And of course, by the Pope, I mean Sauron.
Is that right?
Yeah, Sauron has to exist as a general to then be transported into existence. And also, the Pope has to be somewhere. And I'm pretty sure Forodwaith is the Pope's little section of heaven.
Well, there we go. Now we know, ladies and gentlemen. So if you ever want to destroy this entire game, then you can transport your troop to Cursor. Well, I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for putting up with all of my questions. I know we've been going on a little while now, haven't we? So for now, ladies and gentlemen, I've already mentioned it, that you do have a channel, don't you? And I will be linking that in the description below. It's far more in-depth than anything I've ever done as a faction overview or anything like that. So if you're really interested in Dak, please do pop over to his channel, subscribe to him, and watch his faction overviews and indeed his gameplays.
Well, thank you very much.
It's no trouble at all. And thank you so much for joining us, Elite Dwarf. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you very much.
Oh, there's the phone. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.